Welcome to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Trey Adams. This program is a presentation of the Communications Department of Northeast State Community College. This episode of Direction Northeast is about fear. We'll explore what it is and how it works. We'll start our discussion following these messages.
Going to college was a big decision, but when I graduate from Northeast State, I know I can have a career.
Over half of our employees are graduates of Northeast State Community College.
When we see Northeast State on an application, we always give that candidate a second look.
Our company partners with Northeast State knowing that their students graduate as trained professionals that become our employees both today and into the future.
Discover the career opportunities that await you. Northeast State Community College.
Fear is one of the strongest emotions people can experience. Rich Ames is the power behind a show called Goosebumps, The Psychology of Fear. He is a board-certified hypnotist with the National Board of Hypnosis Education and Certification. His wife and stage partner, Marielle, is also a board-certified hypnotist with MBHEC. She holds a master's degree in counseling from Arizona State University. Today, they will explain how fear works and how we can distinguish between good fear and bad fear. Rich, welcome to the show. Nice
Well, thank
to
you,
be
Trey.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much. Let's start with the most generic question. What is exactly fear?
Well, that's really a difficult question. You're going to ask me the toughest one right off the bat. Fear is almost impossible to define, but fear is generally defined as something that causes us to have either a fight or flight reflex or response. Anything that we fear, we have one of two basic responses to, fight or flight. Some people laugh, and in a way that is fighting or flighting, either one. The way that they deal with fear is what we can try to help people do. We, in this show, first of all, put on an entertaining, fun show where we present people with some somewhat fearful, kind of like going into a scary movie or something. People get to yell and scream a little bit and have some fun. But then we start presenting them with ideas and ways of dealing with fear or stressful situations, of which there are so many it's impossible to define. One of the biggest fears that people have is the fear of public speaking, believe it or not. It's one of the top fears. People actually have rated it above the fear of death or the fear of dismemberment, the fear of getting in front of people and talking.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that people are so fearful of getting up and talking in front of people?
That's a very difficult question to answer because generally speaking, people know when they get up in front of people that there's no death that's likely to happen. People will jump off of the tallest building, they'll go on the highest roller coasters, they'll bungee jump, they'll parachute, all these kinds of things where they're actually in physical danger, and that's just fun, even though they know they're in physical danger. But getting up in front of people, it's a fear of performance. It's performance anxiety. It's getting so afraid that they are going to mess up, and everybody that's watching them is going to know that they messed up. And people that are really afraid can be totally paralyzed. They can get up in front of people and just completely forget everything they were planning on saying.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that judgment plays a part in the big fear of a lot of people?
Sure. Judgment is very important in every aspect of life, but in fear, in things that are causing us stress response, we need to be able to use our best judgment to be able to deal with that fear. And judgment for fear is not something that comes natural to us. We need to learn how to do it. If we all respond just as we would emotionally to fear, like I say, the two main responses to fear are fight, actually fight, or flight, run away. And we need to learn as civilized human beings how to conquer our fears, how to learn to deal with our fears in ways that are not fighting or running away. And that's what this show tries to provide people with some tools to do. Using the power of self-hypnosis. We help people using self-hypnosis. I don't hypnotize them. I teach people how to hypnotize themselves to deal with those kind of stress-inducing problems.
Mm-hmm. Do you think hypnotizing works? Do you think, has it shown accuracy in being able to help people reduce their fears?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing this for a lot of years, and hypnosis is not like you see in the movies. It's not somebody in charge of somebody else's mind. It's teaching someone how to be in charge of their own mind, how to be in control of those kinds of things that they want to be in control of. And with hypnosis, with self-hypnosis, you can learn to deal with those things. And yeah, it's very successful. We've worked for many years with many thousands of people, and yeah, very successful.
How did you come up with the name Goosebumps, the Psychology of Fear? Did you get it from the book, or did you just?
No, actually, actually, the funny part is when I came up with the name Goosebumps, it was just Marielle, my partner, and I were sitting around and we were watching some movie. It wasn't even a big, super scary movie or whatever, and I heard her say, "Oh, that scared me. Look at the goosebumps on my arm." And I thought, Goosebumps just flashed. I thought that would be a pretty cool name for a show. And we'd been doing a number of shows for quite a few years, and I just thought we should put together a show based on fearful things and helping people with those fears. And so Goosebumps came up. Now, people came to me and said, "Oh, did you do it from the books?" And I said, "No, I've never even read the books." So I feel pretty bad about that, but I've never read them. Apparently you have.
I've read a couple of them,
Yeah.
but they're really good books. What are some of the healthy ways that people can deal with fear?
Well, one of the ways of dealing with fear is, first of all, you have to recognize when you're in a fearful situation. Very often people don't even recognize it. People, because they're using that runaway thing, as soon as something comes up that makes them fearful, instead of accepting and recognizing what that situation is, they start to pull back, they start to run away from it, they start to pretend that it's not existing. And as long as you pretend that what it is that's causing you fear isn't there, you'll never be able to deal with it. So first you have to be able to accept the reality of something going on. Then you have to accept that you have the ability to deal with that fear. Most people think, some rightly so because they've never learned, think that they can't deal with fear. When something bad comes up that scares them, they're afraid they're just going to scream or run out or whatever. So you have to first recognize it, then you have to recognize that you have the ability to deal with it, then you need to put an action plan into action to be able to do it. And yeah, once you're able to do those three things, you can handle any kind of fear. Mm-hmm. For instance, our soldiers in the military, we were discussing that before we went on air. Soldiers have to deal with fear. I mean, they're literally in fear for their lives at all times, and they cannot allow themselves to be paralyzed by that fear. So one of the first things they learn is how to recognize what it is that is causing them that fear. And they do. They recognize it quickly. They learn how to deal with it efficiently. They have a plan, and they follow through with that plan. And some people think that the military is so strict, and so, you know, but the point is it has to be strict because people have to follow a certain plan when dealing with those things, or they'll be overcome with fear. Mm-hmm. And I just am in constant amazement at our military, the things that they're able to do and handle and still maintain their humanity. That's important. And military could very easily steal the humanity from people, but so many of them don't. So many of them do a marvelous, exemplary job dealing with fear, dealing with what they have to deal with, dealing with the physical consequences of what may happen. And they all know what may happen. When you get into the military, you know what can happen. But they just do it. They do it well, and I'm proud of our military.
And they are absolutely amazing. You know, you got to think about it. When you wake up and you're in the military, you're far away from home. Mm-hmm. I mean, at every second, your life is on the line, and,
right.
and at any moment, you know, it could be gone.
Right.
So I think that they do an excellent job. Like you said, I think they do an excellent job of pushing the fear aside and just going out and doing what they have to do.
But it's not a matter of pretending that the fear doesn't exist, because one of the first things you learn when you're in the military, I was in the military many years ago, one of the first things you learn is that you have to accept that there is fear. Don't pretend to not be afraid of it. If you pretend, what happens is you start dealing with it in very unrealistic ways, and you don't follow the plan that has been set out for what you do. So you can't push that fear aside. You have to accept it, and you have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Would prayer and meditation be a couple of very healthy ways and good ways to deal with fear?
Absolutely. Prayer and meditation are both very good ways of dealing with fear. Meditation and hypnosis, people always ask me, what's the difference between meditation and hypnosis? And meditation is a calming of the mind, and that helps the acceptance when something is going wrong or bad or stressful. But hypnosis calms the mind, but it also is goal-directed. In other words, directed at accomplishing something, getting something done. And so that's what we teach people. We teach them to calm their minds, accept when that fear comes in, calm your mind, have a plan, and follow through on that plan with your subconscious mind, and that's what hypnosis is.
Why is fear so prevalent in small children?
Well, kids haven't learned, basically young people haven't really learned yet that the world isn't a place that's 10 times bigger than them. When they're walking around, everybody's bigger than them, everybody can hurt them, they're afraid all the time. Kids are always falling and getting hurt and everything, so they begin automatically developing fears. Plus, they haven't developed their fear response, and a fear response is what we're talking about. People go through life without a fear response, an appropriate fear response. That's when people have difficulties. And so children haven't learned how to use a good, appropriate fear response. And it's fine when they're kids because they can run to mom and dad will protect them and all of that. But when you become adults, you have to develop an appropriate fear response. And we help people with that.
Mm-hmm. Talking about small children, do you think parenting plays a role in being able to control children's fears by not letting them watch certain TV shows that might, scare them, make them have nightmares at night?
Oh yeah, sure, definitely. I mean, that's one of the main responsibilities for parents. Raising children today, especially in today's world, there's just so much on television, the internet, and all of that is so dangerous and frightening and everything, and it's the responsibility of parents to watch out for kids. Now, kids will always get into things that the parents don't want them to. That's part of being a kid. But yeah, you're right about that.
Do you think that they should do certain studies to maybe look at what children view, maybe something scary that might affect them later down the road in life, that might cause them to do something that people with a fear or people that don't have a fear would not normally do?
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been a lot of studies throughout the years of exactly that. And studies point the way, and early childhood education and all of that is beginning. They haven't done necessarily a fantastic job in education up until not too long ago, the last 10 or 15 years. But because of the studies and the things, obviously many years ago, children were treated as just little people. They weren't treated as someone with a mind that was completely thinking differently than what adults do. But nowadays people understand, and they understand much more about what it takes to guide children in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Do you think fear can be used as a motivator?
Yes, but fear can also be a negative motivator. A lot of people, there's positive and negative motivation, and I'm a big believer in positive motivation. That's what hypnosis is. It's all about positive. It's all about current, right now. People who use fear as a motivator, if you don't do this, you're going to lose that, or you're going to get hurt, or this is going to happen, or whatever to you. Wait till your dad gets home. When you use fear as a motivator, that can cause short circuits in that appropriate fear response we talked about. Use positive motivations. You're doing this, and that's not really working for you. That's causing problems. If you did this, I bet you could get some ice cream later, because that's a much better way for kids to model appropriate fear response and behavior. So fear is not necessarily a good positive motivator. So
positive reinforcement, you would say?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Can an early childhood fear continue on into adulthood? Do you think that something that you might have feared as a kid affect you when you're 30 to 40, maybe even 50?
Sure, it happens all the time. People come to us in our private practice and they talk to us about a fear, like we dealt with a person who had a fear of bridges for some reason. Every time she was in a car or driving over a bridge, she was scared to death, and she started getting sweaty palms, and she had no idea why. And she was like 35, 40 years old, and she had no idea why she was experiencing that. So we used a little bit. I didn't do it because I don't do age regression, but there are hypnotists who specialize in age regression, where they can actually put someone and actually take them back in time to when they were younger, when the triggering event happened. It's what we call a triggering event. And it turned out that as a very young person, this person had an accident. There was an accident on a bridge. Now, she wasn't even involved in it, but she saw a bad accident on a bridge and somebody was badly hurt. And for some reason, she connected that scene of carnage with bridges. And she had no idea that she was doing that because she was very young. And it persisted clear up until she was in her 30s, almost 40 years old. And she was so afraid of, but then when she was able to be taken back and she saw what that triggering event was, the hypnotist, who was a professional colleague of mine, was actually able to talk her through that and help her to develop a proper fear response for that. Actually develop a response at the time. It's almost as if when you're doing age regression, and I've never actually done age regression, although I've gone to some sessions, I've gone to some workshops and things on it. But when you go into age regression, they can bring you back to where you actually feel you're reliving that event, whatever that event may be. Once they find it, they have you relive it, and when you get to the point where you start making a negative connection, she made a negative connection to carnage and blood and bridges. Instead, he helped her to make a positive connection, a connection between, yes, there was a carnage, she experienced that, but it wasn't her, it wasn't anybody she knew, and she was going to be able to forget about seeing it, and it was going to be all right. Once she began to respond that way to that fear, and then he brought her back up in age to current age, from what I heard, she never has that problem again. She can drive over bridges and never have a problem.
That's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, do you think age regression is a very popular form of hypnosis, trying to, you know, get people to...
Yeah, it's a popular form. It's not something that the average hypnotist knows very much about. Most hypnotists, if you're board certified, you have to take classes in it, along with classes in ethics and all kinds. You have to take certain classes, but that doesn't mean that you know how to do it. And it gave me certainly a real sense of, wow, that's pretty amazing that they could do that. But it didn't necessarily make me want to learn to do it, because it's a very complicated form of hypnosis, and there's a little bit of controversy about it. A lot of people, unfortunately, went into the not just age regression, but past life regression. They started saying, well, if we can regress someone to back when they were young, why can't we regress them to back when they were somebody else? And then you have to believe in reincarnation, and you start believing in past lives and all of that, and then it becomes weird. And once it starts becoming weird, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I don't know. I mean, there are too many things that I don't know. But right now I've seen no evidence of past life regression that actually points to the fact that it exists. I've seen a lot of pretty fascinating studies on it. I've seen a lot of that. But right now, I'm just happy to believe that simple age regression in this life that you're living right now can be very effective, very positive, and it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the most common fears that people face?
A lot of fears. They do surveys and studies all the time, and they come up with the top 10 list of fears. What affects me the most, what I find very interesting, is that almost invariably, the fear of public speaking is in the top 5, certainly in the top 10, but in the top 5, sometimes in some studies, it is the #1 fear. People will actually say they would rather face death, they would rather face anything than speaking in front of somebody, speaking in front of especially a large group of people. To me, it's always come pretty easy to me. I've always, talked in front of people. I've always been a ham. And so I like it, but I can understand where people have that fear. People clam up, people begin to get paralyzed, they can't speak correctly, then they start doubling on the fear. They start saying, oh, I'm saying something stupid. So they start listening to themselves when they're talking. That's one of the worst things you can do, is listen to yourself very much when you're talking. It seems counterintuitive, but it's true. The more you listen to yourself, the more you start saying, oh, no, I should be saying this, no, I should be saying that. And then you start an inner conversation, an inner dialogue, and pretty soon it just locks up, and you have no idea where you're at, what's going on, or anything. And people that have that fear of public speaking, that's one of the most serious things about them. So we teach people that want to learn how to do public speaking to get up in front of classes, to get up in front of groups, and just start reciting gibberish. Because then if you're listening to it, it doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't matter. It's not supposed to make sense. So they start practicing doing blah, 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 just talking in gibberish, and pretty soon they get used to that, and they start shutting that busy mind, which is what we call the conscious mind, the busy mind that's always thinking about stuff. They quiet that down, and then the next thing we do is we give them an actual little talk to deliver. Now, we never have people memorize it at first. We always give them on cards so that they can do a very simple little talk, no big words, anything like that. And we have them do that 2 or 3 times. And the next thing you know, 80% of the time, the person says, hey, this is kind of fun. I like talking in front of people. And then they get rid of that fear of public speaking. That's just one of the main fears. Obviously, the fear of death, fear of the dark. There are a lot of people who seriously have a fear of dark. Claustrophobia is a major problem.
Now, that's one that I have a lot of trouble with.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll give a little bit of a story. I had to have an MRI one time.
And go into that big machine, right.
And I had a serious leg injury, so being tied up in that space and having to sit there for an hour, it just...
I can imagine.
It destroyed me inside. But did you have any trouble overcoming, did you ever have any fear of public speaking, and did you overcome it easily if you did?
I don't believe I ever had a fear of it. From the time I was a kid, I loved getting up in front of people and making people laugh and doing silly things and all of that. I certainly wasn't very funny. I'm not a comedian. People always say, oh, you're a comedian. You go to comedy clubs and do stand-up comedy and stuff. And no, I admire people that can do comedy. Stand-up comedy's not for me. But I just like getting up in front of people and doing things, and I like helping people. And I think with the show that we're doing now, with this Goosebumps Psychology of Fear, we can give people some fun. We give them a few laughs and give them a few, oh, did that really happen? Because there's some stuff that goes on in Goosebumps that you will be saying to yourself, wow, did that really happen? Could that have been a ghost that just touched her on the back? Oh, I mean, we have some serious things happening. We have some ghosts appear and stuff. Touch people on the back of the neck. We had a person today that just was totally freaked out when this ghost touched her on the back of the neck. No one was near her, and she actually felt it. But I'm digressing anyway. But yeah, I never really had any kind of fear of getting up in front of people. Although I still get nervous. People have to understand there's a difference between getting nervous and being fearful. I'm always a little bit nervous before I go on, but I try to translate that into excitement. Yeah, I'm feeling this way, there's a kind of a knot in the pit of my stomach and stuff, but that's excitement. I'm excited. I'm anxious to get out there and do that. I tell myself that before every performance, and it gets rid of any of that fear connotation. It's not fear, it's just a little bit of nervousness, and that's okay.
And do you think a positive response from a crowd can help relieve those nerves?
Yeah, you're not kidding. The worst thing in the world is a negative, or we don't get negative responses. Occasionally we'll get an audience that just sits there, and I've done some stuff that's pretty amazing, and I'll look at them and say, sir, are you having a good time? And they'll usually say, yeah. Well, why don't you tell your face? And then they'll start breaking down and realizing, oh, I'm sitting. So, and that's the way most performers are. Most people who get up in front of people will look for that one person who doesn't look like they're having a great time. And I don't care what anybody else thinks. That one person has got to laugh, has got to have fun, no matter what. And that's what most performers will do.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the different facial expressions that accompany fear?
Oh, well, one of the first evidences on the face of fear is stone. People, it's like a face made of stone. Literally, they'll just, and obviously there's all of the body reactions, the bodily reactions when people fear that people try to cover up, that's one of the natural things, or they lean backwards, their body language. But face, one of the very first responses that I know when somebody is fearful is their face just goes stone still. And then they'll open their eyes in wonder that, did that really happen? Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Over the course of human history, do you think humans have had similar fears, like the fear of heights from back in the 1500s to the fear of heights today?
Yeah, back in the in the 1500s, 1400s, people were really, really and truly afraid of computers. I mean, it was no computers. They were actually, yeah, but there are similar fears. Of course, there's always the fear of injury, bodily injury. But people were very much afraid of things that we today accept and take for granted. I mean, you know, when there would be, way back when there would be an eclipse or something, people had no idea what to attribute that to. Before science told people what to attribute certain things to, anything that was totally abnormal or an aberration, people looked at as you know, something bad was getting ready to happen, and so they started getting fearful of those things. But there's a lot of commonality, I'm sure. I haven't studied a lot about the fears of ancient peoples, earlier peoples, but yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of things in common.
Mm-hmm. This used to be one of my biggest fears, and that's death. Why do you think so many people fear the thought of death?
I think it's not so much the fear of death, at least for me and for some of the people I've spoken to, as it is a fear of, first of all, a fear of what comes after. You know, people who have a strong religious belief, a strong religious faith, generally have less fear of that. But people who don't have strong religious faith very often are quite happy to be living the life they're living, and when it ends, they're willing to accept that it ends. I personally don't believe that it ends when it ends. That's just my personal beliefs. I believe there's more beyond. But I think that the fear of death, first and foremost for me, is a fear of the fun ending. I'm having a great time in this life. My life is great. I don't want to end this fun. I want to keep it going. I'd love to be 120 years old and still having fun. My mentor is 92 years old. And he was a magician, a very famous magician all over the world. And he and his wife, his lovely wife Carol, Marvin and Carol Roy, traveled the world constantly and were the best known magicians. There was an old variety show. You and I are both too young to remember it, but it was called The Ed Sullivan Show. You've probably seen some of the things on TV they're showing. They were on The Ed Sullivan Show more than any other performer, any other act. And he's 92 years old. His wife passed away a couple of years ago, several years ago. And he still goes and performs once in a while. He's 92, so he's not, you know, doesn't travel or anything, but he loves it. And he tells me that as long as Marielle and I keep loving each other and keep working, we'll never grow really old. Mm-hmm. And I believe that.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
This has been an awesome talk. I've enjoyed talking about fear. I feel a little bit less nervous, you know, because I always get up here, I'm nervous, but talking about this with you has been really good.
Well, great.
Thank you very much, and we'll be back in just a moment to wrap up Direction Northeast.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a wife, a mother, and a student pursuing my dreams.
I came back to school with a passion to help people.
Came back to Northeast State to study electromechanical because I like working with my hands.
To be a producer.
At 64, I'm a student and an entrepreneur.
Wherever you are and whenever you're going, we are here to get you there at Northeast State.
That concludes the program for today. We talked about fear with Rich Ames. Community is very important to the students at Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until we meet next time, on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of Northeast State Community College, I'm Trey Adams, and this is Direction Northeast.